Hello, and welcome to another edition of Leafless Not Lifeless with Sharon Benjamin. I am the host, Sharon Benjamin. I'm just excited that you joined me for this edition. I have a great guest for you to meet and hear. If you want to get in touch with me, you can do so by going to or send me information at leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. That's leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. My guest today is a government professional from Ottawa, Canada. Woohoo! Yes. And Rocky Dwyer is with me, and he's going to talk to me about how he moves students from the place that seems to be leafless to a place of growing and development. He works with college students, but he also works with young students as well, doing presentations. And at one point, someone might have looked at Rocky and he might have seemed leafless, but he got a technical degree and he went on to do some other things. And we'll tell you about that. Welcome, Rocky.
Thank you very much for letting me chat with you today and
Oh,
to tell you a little bit about myself.
well, I'm excited. So the audience might be curious to know how you got that name Rocky and to know, is that for real or is that just something somebody
You
gave
know,
you?
that's a question I get a great deal. And in a lot of ways, it comes from a time when, and back in the day, that boxing was very popular. And when I was born, um, and and my mother held me in her hands, in her arms. My hands were clenched in fists, and so they thought there was something wrong. So at the hospital they taped my hands open for several weeks, and when they removed the bandages, my hands went from being straight back into a clenched position. And at the time, Rocky Marciano was a very well-known, world-renowned boxer. So they thought the name Rocky was appropriate. And although I have other names, Rocky is my first name, and Rocky is my preference.
And that's it. Well, comparing to Rocky Marciano, and you're certainly a fighter. Now, Rocky, you actually got your technical degree and you went on. However, as I said in the intro, to some you might have looked, oh, this is just who he is, leafless, but you were still growing and developing. You got that technical degree in accounting, but your wife was pivotal in helping you to see more of yourself. How pivotal was that?
That's absolutely correct. I think, and they say, behind every man is a great woman. I'll come back to what I've always said and maintained over my life. Um, the best decision that I made was marrying my wife. The second decision that I made was listening to the advice that my wife provided. Not only did she provide me with encouragement, but she was the driving force behind me to go back to school when I was around about 35 or so to complete a bachelor's degree. And of course, back in the day, it was online learning was very uncommon. And there was the expectation to move to a brick and mortar. And most brick and mortar institutions required students to be in the classroom for semesters. Well, when you're a working professional, finding that time can indeed be challenging when you move from location to location. And so for me, I happened to be able to find Bemidji State University in Bemidji, which offered individuals an ability to work on their degrees by distance, which was a very new concept, but also be able to come in and do summer sessions for several weeks
That
to
was
complete.
quite innovative.
That was very innovative at the time. And so I went to Bemidji. I lived out west in Edmonton, Alberta. I would fly to Manitoba, drive from Winnipeg, Manitoba to Bemidji during the summer. I'd stay either in residence or at a local hotel, go to classes, and work on my degree. And then when I wasn't working on my degree at the university, I worked at a distance. And so over a couple of years, I completed my bachelor's degree. And I did well. I did well because I had great coaches, great mentors, great facilitators, these university professors. They were, you know, at my age that I am now, but they took the time to work with me and help me create that personal success. My wife was behind me, encouraging me to continue on, and I done it. I done extremely well. I graduated summa cum laude, which was, that's
Congratulations.
quite
Yeah.
a feat in and of itself, and that encouraged me to then think about a master's degree. And so I graduated in June. I enrolled in the master's degree that August and started. And again, I found an institution, the Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York, who had that creative, innovative platform where it was a combination of online, distance, and in class during the summer.
So another school that was starting to be innovative before it was the norm, so to speak.
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about institutions of the day, many institutions were stuck in that realm that in order to learn, you had to be in the classroom and you had to work within that system. And newer innovative organizations like RIT and Bemidji were leading edge. And I'm sure now that there are many more leading edge institutions, but back then, very, very few.
And you
And so
went
I
on to
worked,
get your doctorate?
I guess I went on to finish my Master of Science in Human Resource Management. And then immediately after, I leaped into a PhD program at Capella. And Capella, again, was one of these leading edge institutions. And it was a combination of now online, distance, and in class. And I completed my program. It was about 2 years, but and that's very quick to do a PhD. But again, I had my wife as the driving force. And my, the driving force behind an individual is very important. And I'll explain why. I had completed my doctoral dissertation. I received the feedback. I opened it, and it was a sea of red. And every page I turned, I said a few holy words
That
and
you
more
won't
holy.
repeat here.
I will not repeat, but you'll get the impression. I probably got halfway through. I took it. I went over to the garbage can. I threw it in the garbage can. I threw up my hands and I said, I've had enough of this.
So how did you
I,
keep going? How did you keep going?
well,
And you know
this is the
what?
story. This,
I'm enjoying this because what I'm getting from this is you picked up so much from your own situation that you now apply for your students
yes, well,
who may seem leafless, but you see that there is something in them.
yes, and there is something because my wife never said a word. She left it a couple of days. I was in the office. She came, she had it in her hand. She put it in my hands and she said, for the last several years, I've worked with you. I've done everything. And when I say everything, she done everything, all of the groceries, all of the house, all of the outside, the shoveling. Stand by me and watch me work through this process. Most nights probably seeing me for a few minutes. So now she said, you're going to take this and you're going to make these changes and make these revisions because we have sacrificed too much for you to stop here.
And
And I
how
did
did you feel?
exactly,
How did you feel?
well, I'll tell you what, it was a challenge because it was a sea of red. But I knew what my wife had said was 100% right. Why? Because we had put in, and when I say it wasn't just me, it was my wife, it was our daughter. It was us as a family. We had put in so much time, effort, and sacrifice that I needed to complete the journey. And I needed to show her that, all of the support that you gave me wasn't wasted.
And so, and I hope, and I think that as you work with your students, you probably see the same thing. Now, something you've said about your students is that you like to move them from traditional, let me just make sure I have it correct, traditional boundaries. What do you consider traditional boundaries?
For me, a traditional boundary is students or individuals who have attended what I think are brick and mortar types of institution where there is a class structured every X. You will attend for period X. You will write the examinations and you will continue to move along. Moving from that traditional boundary where everyone is told precisely what to do and when to do it is very different than working in an online environment that we now take for relative granted due to COVID, but pre-COVID we didn't. But in that online environment, there is a need to shift how you work, why you work, when you work, away from that brick and mortar type of structure into a fluid structure where you are in the driver's seat and you are in command of where you go and how you get there.
That
And
sounds Rocky, that sounds a bit like the Montessori model.
it could very well be, and there could be some uh, similarities between it, but I often like to coin it to you and I are in a boat. And when I say I'm referring to the student because when I work with students, it's not Dr. Dwyer, it's Rocky. And I say, if you see that doctor guy, I'm looking for him. Let me know where he is so I can find him and connect with him. But we're in a boat. We're rowing across the Atlantic, or if you're out on the Pacific, you're rowing across the Pacific, and you're rowing, and I'm shouting and bawling and howling. And when the white waves lap in over the boat, because there's been some challenges and some ups and downs, I'm going to help you bail, but I'm still going to shout and bawl and howl. And when I say shout and bawl and howl, that's so we're both in it together and we both set the direction. And I'm going to give you feedback, which is honest and frank, because I respect you as an individual. And I'm going to sit and actively listen to what you say, the concerns that you have, and you're not going to solve those by yourself. I'm going to be there to be your biggest cheerleader, your champion, to work with you each and every day. And collectively, we will solve those types of challenges.
That
And I
sounds
say,
like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and I say it in that way is because when students are successful, I'm successful. And when students are not successful, then I have not contracted, I have not actioned, I have not engaged to make them successful. And I love people to be successful. And I always look at success. I always look at that worldview that can be flexible, that can be changing in an environment perhaps today that is not as forgiving as it needs to be.
So
And
you
perhaps
so you have this philosophy that you just mentioned, and I want to share a picture here. Oops. Want to share with the audience, a picture of you here in what appears to be the library.
it
So
is,
it's
it is the
it
library.
is the
And
library.
yep.
Tell us
And
about.
it's the library, and this picture was taken, and this goes to show you my level of knowledge on a particular topic. So I had been invited to appear on the cover of an accounting magazine, both in English and French, which was, it's one of those bucket list types of things that most people would never accomplish because, who am I type of thing. But I have an interesting background, so I was asked. So I said, okay, this will only be a few minutes. I'll go down because I'm in a business attire anyway, based on the work. And I go down expecting 10 to 15 minutes. Well, it turned out to be about 6 hours.
And
And every
at this time, Rocky, you were at what institution?
I worked at this time in the Defense Department in program evaluation as a principal.
Okay.
So I had a number of junior staff that I worked with every day to evaluate defense programs and to provide advice to senior management on the validity and the achievement of performance objectives in relation to the department's mission, vision, and values.
So you have quite a bit of experience that you actually take to the classroom because so many of the skills and strategies are transferable.
Absolutely.
As a coach, as a coach and a mentor in the role that you are.
In the role that I bring to the classroom, I have worked in about 40 different countries doing volunteer types of work with government, not for profit, and for profit institutions. In addition to the PhD, I have two professional accounting designations, and I am a fellow of both bodies. So I get to engage with a lot of people from a lot of different cultures, around the corner and globally. And that's really what's changed my worldview and how I see things. And it's very simple for people to make judgments, but you need to step back when you make a judgment to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, or to see the perspective from an alternative perspective that the person is seeing.
I like
And
that.
so
I like that because when I go into the classroom at the beginning of the semester, or even when I taught elementary school and the former teachers would send the records forward, I made it a point not to look at those records until after I had made some assessment of the student, because we can always look at people and size them up as not being, as being leafless. However, everybody
mm,
has something worthy inside of them. And so, what you're doing, Rocky, it sounds as if you're looking at your students, not just the college students, but you're looking at even younger students and saying there's something of value there. And I have some more pictures. So, you can talk a little bit about this. Is that you or is that Santa?
well, that could be Santa, although I think the person looks like me. This was a time when I had went to Antigua, and at a last moment, Santa wasn't able to get to Antigua, so I was asked if I would be interested, and I jumped at the chance. We went with Mrs. Claus and my wife. We went to the local hospitals and seen children, and this happens to be a picture of a young child that's in the hospital. We went to orphanages. We went to classrooms. And the joy that you get to see from children, there's nothing like 40, 50, 100 screaming children, Santa, 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 when you go into the classroom. And here's a sample of some of the people that volunteered to take Santa and his wife to visit the kids and to give back. And children are so fabulous. They are so keen, so excited, so insightful. They will say things that you would never expect. And so I talk about the experience, and it is absolutely phenomenal because you see good in everyone.
And that's what Leafless Not Lifeless is all about. And, as I said, there are people, we may look at them and we often, and I think it's just human nature to look at people and make some judgment call. The culture has somewhat encouraged us to do that, but there is some good. And you're doing all these things, and Mrs. Claus is helping you. And early on, we mentioned how your wife was so pivotal in encouraging you in a situation where you might have seemed leafless at the time, but look where you are now. An accomplished,
Absolutely.
an accomplished government official, professor, mentor, coach. And just think about all of these children that where you had the impact, where they saw and they heard someone say, yes, you can.
Absolutely. And this is a picture of what I traditionally call the next generation of leaders. And we would do a reading trip. We would go into the classrooms. We would read to the kids. We'd animate with the kids, and the kids were all excited. And the other thing that we would bring was we would bring in little treats, because we know that kids love to have a little treat, so a little chocolate bar or something, and we would give them out, and they would you'd see the kids sharing. Oh, I don't. Would you like this one? I'll have that one if you want that one, and so on. Or if you look at the young boy here, and he's got his hand on his chin,
Yes.
and he's saying, I'm cool.
Right, right,
I'm
exactly.
definitely cool. But aside from being the definitely cool, he was also well mannered, well, respectful, and he was just playing the part for the picture. And it's exciting to see kids who are in school and the excitement that they want in learning. And when you see people who want to learn, you want to be able to engage with them at their level, on their terms, that help move them forward. So it's not a matter of what I said earlier about the brick and mortar. You need to switch to the new learning. And so when I went to school, I had a math teacher in high school, and if you didn't learn the way he taught, you got labeled as being stupid or dumb.
And at that time, it was okay to use that language in the
Oh
class
yes,
with
absolutely. But
no repercussions whatsoever.
absolutely no repercussions. But it influenced what I did for a long time. And in some ways, I said, you know, I get to a position I will never ever do this because of the impact that it can have. And when you teach, when you coach, when you mentor, there are people who like to read and learn from reading. There are people who need to take notes. There are people who need to just
Just
focus on the task.
use
You know,
visuals.
I
Yes.
worked I worked with a man at one point who said, I don't understand my son. And I said, why, John? What's wrong? Well, he's in his room and he's reading his book, but he has earphones in and he has his pencil and he's flicking this pencil back and forth. So obviously he's not learning anything. And I said, John, I wouldn't necessarily say that. He's in his comfort zone and he's doing well. And John said, why would you say that? I said, you know, in a brick and mortar institution where I've taught, I have seen students sit in the front row, put their head down, and appear to be asleep. I have purposely reached out to the student and said, John, what do you think? John's eyes or Sally's eyes or whoever's eyes flicked open and answered my question. They were in their comfort zone, and that's how they learned. And so when you're sitting there, you might appear to be leafless, but
Leafless.
I will tell you,
Exactly.
there's growth.
Yes, and I want to ask you, as we wrap up our conversation here, the strategies that you use with the older kids, are they the same that you use when you make presentations and work with younger kids? Are they the same? Do you scaffold them, or do you give them to them age appropriately? How do you handle that?
Uh, that will depend on the audience and the maturity of the audience. I'm certainly going to do something very different for older, more mature students, because I can draw down on their business experience or their work experience and say, you think about great leaders. Think about the leaders that you're working with and tell me about the traits that you see. Are those the traits that you want to mirror when you become the next leader of your organization? So they can relate to that. I also, tell stories, for example, about when I had my dissertation and I dumped it in the garbage, because it says, yeah, okay, it's okay to have that level of being upset, but you have to be able to be upset, learn from it, and move on.
And
And for
grow.
And grow. Absolutely.
Yes,
Growth is a
yes.
part of that. And then for the younger children, you can tell stories, but young children are very perceptive in understanding. And so I'll use my grandson and I say to him, can you spell anthropomorphism? And he'd look and I'll say, okay, I'm going to show you how to spell it. And then his mother would say, now, Tristan, you know that if you spell a word, you have to know what it means. And so he will look up what the word means and then he spells it. And even today, when I talk to him on the phone, I'll say, do you know how to spell anthropomorphism? And he can rhyme it off. And I'm teaching him new words. And we've engaged him into a word game where he learns words very similar to a crossword. He's 11 years old now, but I want to instill in him that value, that interest in learning and exploring.
And
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 we all,
as you do those kinds of things, those kinds of practices, those kinds of engagements, when you spark learning in someone, when you help someone to see that they're not leafless, because there are times, Rocky, where people have a lot going for them or a lot in them, but they have to see it. Someone has to show them. And it sounds as if as you work with the different students, you're mentoring and you're coaching, because some of the students come into the classroom thinking not so good about themselves. But when you
absolutely.
but when you show them that they're not leafless, that they really have a lot going on for them. I tell my students sometimes when we have to do the writing prompts, etc., I tell them, you know a lot about a lot of things. So you need to actually put that in. Rocky, I want you to, if you can, if you want to share, how could people get in touch with you? Suppose they want to find out more. How do
Okay.
they
If
reach
people
you?
Absolutely. If people want to get in touch with me, they can send me an email to Rocky, Rocky, dot Dwyer, Dwyer, at mail, mail, dot dot edu. Now, that's a mouthful to remember. So you can also go in on LinkedIn, and when you go to LinkedIn, you'll see that picture you showed earlier,
Yes.
and that's me. And I can tell you, if you connect by LinkedIn, I'll connect back and I'll have a discussion because I've always said, if you want to be a ship in the night, I can be a ship in the night, just passing. However, my philosophy is lifetime relationships
Are
and
important.
to work with people. And, when you're successful, I'm successful. And collectively, we can all make a difference in this world. And everyone has strengths. Everyone has opportunities for growth as opposed to weaknesses. What
Yes.
we want to do is use our strengths to shift and change and grow on the opportunities. And we do that by you never run. Before you run, you have to what? Be able to roll over on your stomach and crawl.
Oh,
And then
that's
you
great. Yes.
learn to stand.
Yes.
Then you can probably take a few steps and then you can run.
Yes. Yes. So thank you so for giving us that awesome close. So if you didn't remember that email, you can certainly contact Rocky Dwyer on LinkedIn. He's there. He will respond. And Rocky, let me thank you so much for being with me. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for all of this valuable information you shared and how you are actually helping students, young and old, go from what might seem to be leafless to a growth and development period. So thank you so much. And thank you for watching and joining and being with me again on this edition of Leafless Not Lifeless. I'm Sharon Benjamin. Do you have a story? Has it appeared that you were leafless at one point, but you were actually growing and developing? I would like to hear from you. Contact me at leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. That's leaflessnotlifeless@gmail.com. And I too will get back in touch with you. Again, thanks for watching and joining. And I will see you the next time on the next edition of Leafless Not Lifeless.